Welcome back, guys, to the Edge and Flow podcast. I'm here with my
Re-
co-host, TJ Schwartz.
this is the resurrection season.
TJ and I basically have not talked in the last month. This has been a gnarly summer. This is going to be a super messy episode, maybe slightly more disorganized than most. But we're kind of like, I think, back on track now a little bit. TJ and I had started talking before we hit record, and I could just kind of feel the proverbial floodgates kind of opening, and we decided we should probably just start rolling. Dude, how are you doing?
I'm doing actually very well. And
Yes.
that's because I have a weekend of hanging out with the kids to look forward to, which haven't been around for a few weekends, so that's nice. And yeah, I'm just finally lowering the vibrations a little bit. So
Slowly
yeah,
tapering
yeah.
off. Okay, well, where we were at a minute ago was you were talking about your plans, and you were saying, I thought something that was like pretty interesting, which was right now you're really focused on making like your plans achievable on a weekly basis. Is that
hmm
give me some like background into that?
I was just gonna say, it's really natural in like the modern economy to make everything monthly, because mortgages are monthly and
Yeah.
rent is monthly. Seems like everything's monthly, car payment or whatever. And it's like, to me, I lived on a monthly basis. Like it was like a 12-month rhythm with the business, with like trying to reach goals, make sure we've met our needs. And it was sometime back, I don't know, within the last 12 months, but I can't remember exactly when. It might have been late, like last fall. Started looking at everything as weekly instead of monthly, so that the first of the month is not really that ceremonious. It's really actually every Monday that is sort of when I gear up for the goals of the week.
Right.
And just sort of having the basic arithmetic of like, if we do this every week, then the monthly goals are a byproduct. Like I don't have to think about that.
Right.
um, Reason being is it's like, rather than a monumental lift on the first of the month that gets you in gear, and then you have this, freak out session for 10 days working hard, and then like kind of a burnout fizzle and then over again. It's like, if I can compress that, like, I don't know if stress is the right word, but that like drive into like a 48, like a Monday and Tuesday, like is where it's really cranking. And then Wednesday and Thursday is like you're starting to kind of put it together, but it's like you've already made most of the lift, at least mentally and like drive wise. Then it's like, then you have the weekend, and it's easier on my brain to have a cycle of like stress and relaxation on a weekly basis rather than on a monthly
In a
basis.
month. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Oh, I mean, just just from a overall success rate too. I think like the more consistent you can make like the small habits to be successful,
hmm
like lower the likelihood of the bigger goals falling short,
hmm
right? If you like look at this like batch work with knives, it's I've kind of always thought that, like, I know there's makers who are like, I'm working on this batch and it'll be done in 2 months. And
hmm
it's like, however many knives. And that always, I think with like my ADHD, I just don't think that method works for me. But I also looked at it, I'm like, man, like if you can't finish that thing for some reason, it's like that's a huge amount of income revenue that might get delayed versus like maybe over the course of the month, like the overall output is slightly less, but it like is happening like very consistently.
hmm
And I think that, I don't know, um, coming out of this summer, I think that like really hits home. Um, just because like I look and I'm like, some of the projects and like the longer timelines have been drastically altered by like small things that have happened day to day, like with the
Mhm.
kids or, with just anything other than work. And like, I think that the part of this is like fairly relevant is like we make plans based on like the best possible circumstances,
Yeah.
but it's very rarely ever that.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
I wonder if you had to like make like a generalized percentage to account for failure. Like someone's done this, like Toyota has done this, someone's done this.
Hmm.
Like what is that percentage?
Yeah, right. Like a margin of error, I guess you might
Yeah.
call it. It's like
Yeah,
a
margin of error for an 8 or like a like say like for you, right? You're a 10-hour workday. Okay, 4 days a week.
mhm.
You make a plan, you're like, "Okay, here's my production plan." What percentage of that actually becomes the productive work?
Ooh, that's tough for me because I've gotten into the position where I've struggled with this, and that is having help in the shop here. It's like the like more boots on the ground productivity
Yep.
is in their hands more than mine by quite a bit. And
Yep.
for me, it's harder to measure the productivity that I have because it's more ethereal, like bigger picture is what I'm usually like focused on.
Yeah.
And so I'm visiting like the shop needs in terms of over the next few weeks, like making sure I'm ordering the right stuff,
Yeah.
making sure we have the right plan, making sure if we're going to launch a new model, is it going to be ready by this time? What needs done on that? And so I can't really measure it in like output.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I
You
actually,
don't but you don't really need to I guess in that
yeah,
way because you're thinking like overall shop output, not like personal
yeah.
output. Here's a question. Is your process dialed enough that you would be able to hire someone to like you're saying like materials, components, like all of these small things, like is it dialed enough that you could have someone doing that?
Yeah, I think so. Having either someone who's working on the shop floor who also has the task of ordering and things and like
Right.
materials management, yeah, that could be done.
Materials manager. Yeah, well, I was
Yeah.
thinking like what would that role be? And like how
Mhm.
much of your time actually goes to that? I don't know.
Fortunately, with the Kanban, that's not been very difficult. The
Yeah.
Kanbans make it to where I don't feel like I need to delegate because it's only like a 30-minute thing every week to
So
like,
yeah, maybe it like eliminates and by not delegating that you like maintain ultimate control over it.
yeah. And well, the thing is though, we brought on a new line like with the LC5, and it's like
Mhm.
every single piece is different. I think the only piece that's the same of hardware is like the eyelets in the sheath. Every
You're talking
single
about from your standard models
from our other
or
models.
other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like the LT5 is not even Kanban yet,
Oh,
because the initial batches were too exploratory. You know what I mean?
yeah.
To where it's like we got to order some bigger numbers to start on these bigger batches to get us rolling. But I was talking to the guys in the shop this week that it is now time to like establish the Kanbans for each of those things,
Right.
which means calculating what is the correct volume of parts, and that is related to the lead time for those parts.
Right.
And so I still have to do that. So I'm in charge of, establishing that order flow for the that new line. And then with the idea that once you put in the groundwork on that, you could have another model that uses those same parts or similar enough that
Right.
you're now stacking in a different way. Um, so like the Kanban, once something is Kanban, it's basically a zero stress, no lift. Like I don't have to worry about it. I do order it
Right.
myself, but it's not something I think about. But it's new exploratory stuff. It's like how do you Kanban it? When do you Kanban it? It's the system design, which is
The
what I
energy usage, I think, around system design this last couple of months has been interesting for me because I think I've dealt with this in a way that I haven't really had to before, but it's like made it very clear. But like the energy usage around like system development is so high
hmm
because it's all problem solving. It's all new task. And I think on a custom side, So like for me, the perfect storm would be like example would be like show prep, where I'm not actually working from a system, but I'm designing the show. And so the energy usage to come up with like the model variations, the finishes, the materials at a scale that is like pretty high number wise for what I'm normally doing. It's probably cognitively one of the hardest tasks. I like struggle with it every time. And I keep trying to figure out a way to like can that, but it's all a lot of times it's like one-off things. And I
Mhm.
don't actually
Mhm.
know how to do it. From your standpoint, yeah, it's like right, you're as soon as that system is designed, that cognitive load is done for the foreseeable future until you make
Yeah.
another round of
So you have a
changes.
reason to do something different. Yeah.
Where I've been seeing the variation to this. So basically, I did like pre Blade Show, I was working on the Kihoku, right? And that was like the big deep dive. Got it running, got like first production kind of like run 10 pieces, like
Mhm.
sprint run, it works. Just this week, I started running them again. And that is like illustrative of like my last month. But the peace of mind and like the shift from going from what I had been working on was like all this one-off stuff for Pacific Northwest custom show to going back to something where I'm like, I have a process. I'm starting this process. Okay, the process is working. It was shocking. All of a sudden, it was like, oh, I'm just working, not problem solving. I'm not like putting out fires. I'm not trying to figure out like next steps. I'm literally just acting.
Mhm.
That's super interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think buy in to your own systems, and if you have employees, them buying into your systems,
Yeah.
that's like where the victory is, because it's like if you can design a system but you can't get bought into it, obviously it's not going to, I mean, that counteracts the benefit of it. But
Trying to think of like a good, the example that first came to mind is when we were talking about tool offsets and how to achieve that. Basically, reading about shops trying to shift to like
mhm,
a tool setter and like old machinists just being like, no, I don't want to do that. Like,
mhm.
I set off this block, you set off, like, I don't want to do a probe or whatever. So that would be a good example of like a good process that is hard to get people to actually utilize.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you can also sometimes say, I feel like, that if you can't get buy-in on a system, it could mean the system is bad. You know what I mean? Like it's not always, but you have to make
Totally.
determinations on that of like it's just like, economic models and stuff. It's like human nature has to be accounted for
Right.
in systems. It's like if it's only as good as what you're willing to actually do in real life. You know what I mean? So that's part.
This is like where in I think like perfectionism and like some like neurodivergent traits are like really, really tricky. Right. Like
Mhm,
if you're like on like the autism spectrum or something where you're like you have this like very, very defined sense of like right and wrong, and that translates to a method, and you're like, no, this process is correct.
mhm.
You're like, yeah, but like the humans around you actually like can't
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I bet that comes up pretty frequently, actually, where you're like
Mhm.
one process or like I like with engineers, like process engineers, like looking at things and being like, this is the way we do it. And you're like, we can't do that. Like
Yeah.
the humans can't do like or won't interact with it that way.
Yeah, and it also like there's a gut feeling also of like to what degree is the system flexible? Because it'd be a
Right.
flawed idea going in to say that like this is the rule of law and that there's no scenario where there's flexibility because for example, like I'm trying to order for the LT5 to start it out, I created a spreadsheet with links for every single part with
Yeah.
a calculator in it. So if I type in the batch size, it populates the units for
Genius. Yeah.
every single part of the knife. So I just have to like when I start a new batch, I type in the number at the top. I change all of the quantities to red, and then I go click on each link and order that quantity and change it to green. And if there's something that's like weird, I have to change it to yellow if it's like, oh, there's going to be a lead time, or I can only get 50% of these right now. So that I can come back and be like, okay, there's one yellow left, like, and I can dig into that to make sure I'm on track. So that's like in place of what'll eventually be Kanban. But what I'm getting at is that, for example, some of the hardware that I have, there's this one particular hardware that I really like from a distributor that has a minimum for the dealer discount,
Hmm.
but the minimum is a lot higher than what I needed for this batch. And so it's like that's where the flexibility in the system comes in. It's like, okay, so this sheet is telling me I need to order this many, but I'm not allowed to order that many. So I have to order more. And it's like that's a aberration. That's like
Right.
the system has to flex because that now means I have to like type off to the side, like carry over this many for the next batch, you know what I mean, or whatever. Um, so that's where it's having rules and systems, and then a record of when and why you break them too. You know what I mean? So it's like,
That's crazy because that's a you job. So that as a trickle down with an employee, I always thought this was like interesting conceptually, which is like, where do you give like autonomy and the ability to make changes? Like I can't remember what the exact context was, but I remember talking with someone and basically the 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 idea was that their employees like didn't have to come to them. I mean, this was like around a pricing thing or something. It's like, okay, if it's under $200, like you don't have to ask.
hmm
And
hmm
they were like, that cut down on the amount of questions that were being fielded by like 80% or something.
yeah,
And I was like, that right there, like that's an efficient. So if you're like, okay, when it's like a if this then that
yeah,
scenario,
yeah, yeah,
like you're allowed to order 100, you need to order 500 to actually be able to order them, but it's under the total cap of like your monetary limit.
yeah,
So you just order the 500. It's like
um,
that stops a question from coming to you.
yeah, yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're right. And making sure anybody other than you that's involved in the system, um, that they have parameters, but not like such tight guidelines that they constantly feel like they're having to check with you. Because
Yeah.
that if they have to, you know, if you're overseeing the system in that like granularity, then that's not the goal of the system either, for
Right.
sure.
I'm trying to
So,
figure it out right now. Like we're after this thought, can we do our shop updates? Because like
hmm
this
hmm
is okay, this is where it's getting messy. Yeah, thinking about like an employee and like even running right now through the Kihoku, I'm like, I could I could have someone in, but I couldn't set somebody loose because I'm
hmm
still developing the process. And it almost feels like it would make it more difficult because I think my brain would be itchy being like, all right, like I made these changes, like just let me run it and like make sure it's working.
hmm
And like, okay, like you stand over here. Like I would like run it and like, now I gotta make some more change. It's like just not there yet.
hmm
I could bring someone in for like parts of the process, but not like I couldn't give any ownership yet. And
Yeah.
nobody else could make the changes that I need right now without being like a very high level
hmm
employee.
Yeah. 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 I think back to the one man shop days for me and how I was trying to settle on a process, not necessarily like as fast as possible, but I tried to each layer of the process. I was like, okay, I need to settle on best practice
Yeah.
and move on sooner rather than later, so that when I hand this like you know, theoretical sort of manual to the next person,
Yeah.
like all the pages aren't just like scratched out and like notes and stuff. Like it
Yeah.
needs to be
Totally.
concise.
Yeah.
And even though I'm the one doing it and it doesn't necessarily need to be concise for me, it's like the process eventually needs to become concise, even if I think it's not quite optimal, but I'll revisit it and make it more optimal, but it needs to be concise, even if not optimal. You know
I
what I mean?
think that I sent you that message yesterday. I was like, this is running like 100%.
Hmm.
Now it's like optimization.
Yeah.
I think almost like compartmentalizing some of that process, like, or stages, just compartmentalizing stages. You're like, right? Like, I'm looking at Kihoku and I'm like, you are, I think it's technically still in a prototyping phase.
Hmm.
Okay. Because my setup, like, I have some permanent fixturing, but I might have to improve it. I have some, like, of the actual physical product, I think is dialed, but maybe that part's not fully fixed or something where it's like
Hmm.
I could say it's like, and I'm producing it, like I can make numbers, but it doesn't feel like it's something that I could build like a worksheet for and just
Yeah.
be
It just has too many holes right now.
too many holes. Yeah,
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
put it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, but there has to be a point where, and this is like something that I have always struggled with. It's like, where do I actually stop?
Hmm.
And then where does it become a completely different product? I remember like doing like complete, like this is probably 18 years ago or something. Um, I would make a model, I'd make a pattern, I would make a run, I would make a change to the pattern. And I remember one model specifically at one point looking at it and being like, this is not the same model.
Hmm.
I've made these micro changes until 100% that should have been a model and this should be a model.
Hmm.
That is really easy to do when you're doing hand, like, drawn templates or like hand shaped templates on CNC with fixturing. That starts to become like a real problem.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to get it to a point and then be like, okay, this is the product. If you don't like it, you cancel it or you make a new
Yeah.
generation of it, but
Yeah.
it's not like little changes constantly.
Yeah. It has to be some discrete finality to it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
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 Okay. Shop updates.
You
What do you
know,
got going on?
go. I'm I'm amazed and really happy with. I mean, like I said, I didn't step foot in the shop or in my own house for 6 straight weekends, just with weddings in the family, bachelor party, blade show, 5th anniversary. I mean, just like a
Everything.
stack,
Yeah.
and
Cascade.
it was a fantastic time. I'll be honest, like there was anxiety about like, man, what's happening to the business that like with my mental load totally being diverted, like, what's gonna be at the end of this? You know what I mean? And big testament to Dalton, huge props, and Steven in the shop. It went really well.
Good team.
So from a business standpoint, even though I was extremely distracted and not available, gone a couple weeks out of the last month, and we came out like out of this month. I mean, we're in a better position than we've ever been, I would say by quite a bit. And I think it's partly because we're grabbing new gears in this new shop and
Yeah.
finally, and we're seeing it materialize with the new efficiency levels. And that continued to occur even when I was sort of making a disappearing act here and there. So I'm really proud of the team, and I mean I'm happy with what's going on. The
That's amazing.
LT5 is being converted into a more weekly model, like I
Okay.
talked about. So that's kind of the next thing. But it's off to the races, and we're trying to
So
build.
previous to this, was Blade Show the LT5 like kind of like debut, or it had it already dropped?
I'd sold a few before that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was probably a couple weeks before that. Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, man, good team, good like the process is the product. So you guys are doing well. It's interesting, like uh summer is really tricky, man. Like with kids and small teams. I had sent you a message a while back because I saw that our friends at Mark of the Maker, somebody had commented like they had also been like kind of like missing some episodes, and everyone's like, it's, it's summer, like we're our kid, like things are busy with kids,
Yeah.
things are busy with like families traveling. Um, I have been in a similar boat to you, kind of, but like I actually don't know. So shop update for me, we got to do blade update too.
Hmm.
Basically post blade for me, I came home. I was psyched. I was on the plane. I was like, I felt so good. The show was really successful. I felt like recharged, which is like not all together common for me after trade shows. I didn't feel like tired, run down, anything. I came home. Next day, I tested positive for COVID.
Hmm.
That wrecked me for a week. And honestly, it may have been like kind of a blessing in disguise because I just slept
Hmm.
and I'd been burning so hot before Blade. I think my body would have, it needed something anyway.
Hmm. Hmm.
Directly during that, we had family come into town for like 8 days. So like family vacation starts. I miss half of that, roll from that into family vacation, out of that into show prep. And that's like where I've been existing since then, like mid June. Um, the show is next weekend. It's been insane. And this is like, it's tied in with like kids and summer camps and like trying to be like an active father and like trying to let my wife remember who I am. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a lot. Summer's a lot.
Yep. Yep.
Two
And
shows back to back in the summer, probably not an ideal plan for me.
yeah, yeah, I can hear that. And also, yeah, the beginning of summer because it feels like everyone's pent up
Yeah.
for that warm weather, and then that's when everything gets planned. And then by like August, it's like we're all just like cooking in the heat and
Cooking.
just sort
Yeah.
of waiting for fall.
Yeah.
You know?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Dude, I've
Oh.
spent so long working for myself and like this this will have to change at some point because of the boys, but I literally holidays do not enter my thought process. I don't think about it. I don't think like don't we've talked about this before, like I was homeschooled and like I work for myself. Like I do not think I don't even think in terms of like summer break
Hmm.
because I didn't get one. So at this point like there's so many things where I'm like I kind of get blindsided. And I think like where we're at right now, which is not flexible time wise, it's like oh, it's the 4th of July. Like I actually in my brain, I'm like, I'm not set up to like take the day off with my family.
Hmm.
So I'm like doing these like I'll get up, work super early, work a half day, try to like cut and like go hang out. It's it is not it is not a maintainable way of working. I don't want to maintain it, but like I look at it and I'm like, this would not be something that I could keep up with for a whole lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah. It's
So
I can relate. Having been married, like it's starting to change me a little bit, but like you were saying, the holidays, other than Christmas or whatever, it's
sure.
like it's just you look and you're like, oh, tomorrow. Yeah, even my birthday, it's like, oh shoot, tomorrow's my
Same.
birthday. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I just don't think about it.
Hmm.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. That so basically like right now shop update for me like it's just been full it's just been in like full custom production mode for months. Um feels certain way it feels pretty good. Like I'm very happy with my output, but I'm ready. Like again, starting the Kihoku, I think like it feels really, really good. So the plan is basically like get back from Seaside and dive really hard into the Kihoku and just try to
Hmm.
get on
Hmm.
like a a monthly routine that is like a manageable workflow and like production output. During this time I've also like had some like work backups. Like I've got design work for Boker, design work for CRKT that like I need to get in
Hmm.
and just have not had like the time or the bandwidth
Yeah.
to even like sit with it.
Yeah.
A lot's a lot. Like,
Yep. I hear it, dude. I hear it. Yeah, we try to keep the schedule for the month of July pretty wide open. it's not going to stay that way. But yeah, trying to the weekends. I mean, just give ourselves some breathing room here for a little bit.
You're
But
doing it well, man. This is definitely not by design. And I would say like four, 6 months ago, beginning of the year, I was on like a very good work kind of like life cycle.
hmm
This is just like, it was just a sleeper kind of like ramping up in like, this is how I used to work pre kids.
hmm
Does not, does not work with current lifestyle.
So how does it? How do like? What's the excitement level for the work? How do you feel about that? Like,
Right
is it?
now, honestly, I've actually been pretty excited. And I think like it doesn't feel like drudgery.
I was gonna say, so like the like long hours and stuff. It's sort of a reinvigoration in some ways. You know what I mean? That's the silver lining.
Yeah, and I think I've got enough projects that are interesting to me that I think that's been very helpful. And all of these things are refinements where, like, okay, I know that if I'm going to work 7 days a week, like I need some like dopamine hits. So it's like, I ordered a bamboo printer. Like
hmm
some of this stuff, like coping mechanisms are real. You know, I didn't open the bamboo printer because I also know that if I open the box, I'm
Pandora's
gonna
box.
lose 3 days
Yeah.
because I'm gonna see the new shiny and I'm gonna go set it up and then I'm gonna try to make something that's not gonna work. Then I'm gonna get involved in problem solving and I'm not gonna be able to detach. But the box sitting on the shop floor is enough of like a driver where I'm like, oh, that's sick. When
hmm
I get home, I'm gonna mess with that thing. It's
hmm
here. It's really weird. I've always had this thing around like in the last stages of show prep, a lot of times I will crave junk food. It's
Mm.
really, really weird. But I allow
Comfort
myself,
food.
yeah, it's full comfort food and it's like
Yeah.
trash. It is like I want McDonald's and I like have like a specific thing that I've gotten for years and years and years. And I can tell like, oh, I'm at that stage of show prep because my body is like it's needing like
hmm
this last little push.
Yeah.
Um so I think the other part that's really helped is like pre-blade, like all of my daily habits kind of fell away. Like I literally did not have the time. Since I've been back, like I've been able to make time to like go surfing and do like certain activities with the kids and like just have like 10% more flexibility than I did. And that I think has really, really helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, not ideal, but I don't know. Like some of this stuff, like I think it's okay to push really hard sometimes, even if just to like for the muscle memory of like
hmm
letting myself know that I can do it
Yeah.
and then be like, no,
And
I don't want to do that.
well, it's the same thing of like, yeah, reminding you of what the goal is. You know what I
What the
mean?
goal
Because
is. Yeah.
it's like, I don't want to have to work this hard, but I'm going to work this hard to remind myself why I don't want to work this hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
Like,
to be fair too, like this is, I mean, the bright side of this is like financially, like it's great. Like I'm going to do 2 shows within 2 months of each other, and that's a big cash influx because I'm making more than I would in a normal month. It's
hmm
coming at a time cost, but like when we come out at the end of it, it'll be good financially.
yeah, yeah.
And so like I think that has to be taken into account too. And it also drives like the like hyper focus, like creativity. Like
hmm
I've come out with it, like figured out a couple new processes and like in this time, like we've actually like worked through like a few new products and it's all of those things are really, really good. I think I was telling you earlier, my biggest fear right now is that I've been on this cycle now for, I think it's over 3 months. So like over 3 months of basically 7 days a week. Um, when I'm done with Seaside, I actually I don't know what my taper off is going to be because I don't think my body is going to be okay with like taking a break.
hmm
So I'm trying to figure out like what the wind down is
Yeah.
and then making sure that that wind down doesn't turn into like just like exhaustion, like burnout, like,
Yeah. Like check out. Yeah.
check out, like,
Yeah.
oh man, like the fight's over, like I'm gonna not do anything.
I saw a funny thing and it was like the caption was how my brain works. And it was like, I really want to relax, but I wish I could find a way to make relaxing more productive.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you have to be careful about that. Like, I mean, you can make relaxation unrelaxing by overlaying productivity on it too. So
Uh,
it,
super easy.
yeah. So sometimes like a Netflix show is fine for
Anything.
whatever it's worth.
So I've noticed two things. So for me, like truly doing nothing is that's the only point where like I can get my brain to stop. So like reading is actually the best. That is the best technique if I'm like I need to like let my brain slow down and recharge. Like even like playing video games doesn't work the same way because you're problem solving and you're like getting these little like spikes of adrenaline or dopamine or whatever it is as you're playing. Reading is like such a flat kind of
Yeah.
baseline
A
where
little
it's
bit of meditation aspect to it.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
almost sleep in a weird way.
Yeah.
That's like very, very helpful.
Yeah. It's
Dude, I don't know.
reading. I need to do more reading. I haven't
Pretty
done
good. I do
much
five
recently.
pages. I do. It's not much, but I do 5 pages a day, like without fit, like just as, and it's, I make it through books,
Mm,
at
yeah, that's
five
good.
pages a day. Cause a lot of times what'll happen is like, you'll read the five and then you'll be, like, oh, I'm going to like keep reading. And maybe I read
In the
10
middle of
pages.
a yeah.
Right.
I'm
Sometimes getting five, like my brain is so scattered that getting five is actually a struggle.
mm-hmm.
Or I'm rereading a page a
Yeah.
couple times. I can always tell that's when I'm not like connected.
I haven't done
Um,
that.
weird like tie-in, but have you seen any of the Inside Out movies with the kids?
I think I've like caught pieces of them, but I haven't
Okay.
actually sat down and
We
watched.
we actually that was like a fun break. We like went and took the kids to see Inside Out 2. It's really funny because there's like a new, like for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's like a movie, it's like basically emotions as characters like inside of a body,
Yeah.
but there's like a new emotion introduced and the emotion is anxiety
Mm,
and it's like hyper productive. And I
mm,
was watching it and I was like, oh man, like that's too on the nose
yeah.
of
It,
like how it's like planning for every contingency and like
yeah.
like no, but you don't have a solution for this problem that's
Yeah.
going to be directly related to this situation that you are creating now. And I was like, that's probably something to look at a little bit.
Yeah,
Like
I need to watch that. That's
it's,
a
it's
I
really good.
I love the premise. I mean, the idea of like basically anthropomorphizing emotions, you know what I
It's
mean?
pretty
Like,
great. Like if you think
yeah.
about it for kids, I mean, or me
Mm,
apparently, like being able to put a name and a face to something that is very clearly felt,
mm-hmm.
that's like pretty clever,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I'll have to watch that. Try the kids to dig it.
There you go. Movie night.
Yeah. So
Blade.
we brushed by Blade. You
Oh
want to talk
yeah,
more
yeah.
about Blade?
Yeah, I was just gonna say let's do Blade update.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Blade. Is
Your
the long
first exhibited main Blade Atlanta show, right?
I have appeared in other exhibits, but I have not had my own like with my banner, my
Yeah,
table,
yeah.
my booth.
That's what I
It's
mean.
the first time, yeah.
Okay.
And so it was a great experience. It was the longest time I've ever spent in Atlanta because I've never had to have the front and back end days for like tear down and
What were you
setup.
there? What days?
Like had to be Wednesday through Monday.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
usually do. It's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah, it's a good long haul. But it was I really enjoyed being at Blade Show, which I expected I would. I think it was worthwhile. I really enjoyed the conversations with customers. I think that's really the whole reason to do it for me.
Yeah.
Um, the lead in and coming out of it was like not as good feeling because it was because the month after it I knew was going to be an absolute train wreck with my availability. And then
Right.
before it, we move shops, and we're trying to build that head of steam and the momentum, especially with like a new model. And it felt like where the show was in just in time was like right when we get momentum is like a giant curb to just trip on. You know what I mean? And so it like at the show was great, but you and I talked about like the timing of it was
Yeah.
very off. Like it was very off for me. Just maybe that's mostly in my head, but it was very disturbing
Well,
to the
it broke your flow,
yeah, yeah, which
basically.
is okay. I mean, shows do that, but it was just at a time when the flow was like picking up steam and it was like overdue. Like
Yeah.
it was time for us to get going in the new shop, and we
Yeah.
had been doing well, but it was like we were putting all the pieces together, and then it just fell apart again. But luckily, that's where I had that feeling of like this after the fact. I'm going to be super unavailable, and this is gonna could be messy. And we were able to pull through it. So it's like maybe the consequences weren't what I thought.
Sure.
But it was the show was amazing. A lot of
Yeah.
good conversations, a lot of good people.
Any
Um,
high points of the show for you?
high points, same as I mean, we talked about it last year with high points. I really enjoy talking to international people. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, but I'm like really drawn to talking to people from who came in from other countries to be there
Yeah.
because it just kind of expands my world, you know what I mean? So obviously Blade Show's full of international folks and
It's also like a high level of like interest and passion, which is, I think, really fun. Like if
mhm,
someone's flying in from Europe or
yeah.
Asia, like they're really in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those are fun conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And good time talking to you, although we talked for all of 20 to 30 minutes for a whole 6 days.
I know. I think
Yeah.
like, and it was a high point actually was
Yeah.
like the first night we were there,
Yeah.
sitting down in the bar,
Hmm.
hanging out with Tim and Anne Reeve
Yep.
and
Yep.
just having like a long conversation. It's what we're doing right now. It's like ranges from life to like business to like, being able to sit with someone like Anne too, where there's so many years of experience and like industry knowledge. It's like that to me, that's shows. Like
Hmm.
that is so valuable. You can't recreate it. Like, and it's so organic. That was fun.
Yeah. No,
But that was the time that you and I talked to. That was it.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well, we talked and then the group got bigger and we didn't, which is fine, but I guess that's why we have a podcast, huh?
I mean,
But
it's not wrong.
yeah, but no, it was it was a good experience. The only thing is we did get into the big room with our booth.
Yep.
They rearranged the big room a little bit. Our booth space, I can't complain at all because it's our first year.
Yeah.
No problem with it. But I could see in that booth space why location matters because we had the beginner booth space for the big room. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was like a little bit less traffic, probably a lot less traffic where we were
Yep.
at, which is fine. You know what I mean? Like it's how it goes. But
Yeah. Well, and it gives you the ability to look and be like, all right, like this is something I always talk about, which is like the trade show provides the venue. It's a venue.
mhm.
It's on us to also improve like our demand,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And
yeah.
like like what are you doing to let people know where you are? What are
Hmm.
you doing to build hype for the show? What are you doing? And it's like if you're counting on foot traffic, placement makes a lot of a difference. Like, door right. It's like
Yeah.
the old school dudes, like they still talk about like where they want to be like in the room. But
Hmm.
it's I think for a lot of them, there's no like pre-build,
Yeah.
right? Different
Yeah.
culture.
And that goes for me too. I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it in that way. I was
Right.
mostly concerned with getting there, getting product there,
Yeah.
which is possibly kind of a missed
I mean,
opportunity.
not
But
really. It's an impossibility. Not
mm,
not an impossibility, but like it's a lot to
mm,
to undertake, especially without having it be like, oh, like next year, if you go into this next year and you're in the same spot, you will know that you have to do something to like drive some people to your booth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you didn't know that going into it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not obvious. Like it's a new booth, a new space. You don't even really think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a fact.
Overall successful.
Overall successful, yes. It did also confirm the Blade Show is EDC heavy, I think.
Yes.
Or Overland Sport model is our EDC model. From there
Yes.
up, you get further and further away from EDC.
Yeah.
It was obvious in that room who was there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Overland Sport, our number one seller at the show by far. And I think that correlates to the fact that I'm coming from the Blade Show world. I'm coming from the EDC world. I'm known for designing folders. The sport fits my history with
Yeah.
being an EDC person.
Yeah.
And so the bigger knives, I noticed like it wasn't the right room. You know what I mean? And it became, I talked to some other people, not
Yeah.
that like there aren't some people like that, but you think about the thousands of people that go in there, it's
Right.
not super dense with someone that's going to buy a 5-inch camp knife like the
Right.
LT5.
Right.
And I talked to some other makers who said the same thing. They're like a bushcraft guy. He's like, "Yep, when I come to Blade Show, I make my smallest models."
Right.
And it just, you know what I mean? So that was really informative and interesting, which I'm happy about because I'm happy with having the Overland Sport as an outdoor aesthetic that is an EDC knife.
Yeah.
And so it still ties in because its big brother is the true outdoor knife.
Yeah.
And then we are now paving the way, like with the LT5, to enter the sphere that I'm not necessarily known in. So it's like sort of building new inroads into like true, bushcraft outdoorsman worlds. And then maybe possibly eventually hunting and stuff like that. And I like that I can see distinct pools that we're targeting
Mm-hmm.
because we could try to double and triple dip in a given demographic or given group.
I love that. I
And
love that so much.
so I'm trying to make sure they all are correlated to each other, but they serve different crowds or needs. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I don't even know if like correlated. They just like, this is like an authenticity issue, right? Like not a cash grab
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, oh, this thing's popular. Let me do this thing. You're like basically looking at a product line and being like, okay, yeah, like I have roots here. My interest currently is here. There's an overlap and a value,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of that like works together. I while you were talking, I had two thoughts. First thought is, and maybe this is like an, as I say it, going to be an obvious statement. So like, is EDC the new tactical? I think yes is the answer.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when I say that, what I mean is early, like for a long time, like 2000s, I would maybe 90s on into the mid 2000s, tactical was kind of the catch-all term for like the modern folders that really became popular,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a hunting knife, it's not a slip joint, it's not a Bowie, right?
It's really like
It's a tactical.
the absence of wood and like high polish
Yeah, for the
almost
most part,
defaulted it
right?
to being called a tactical. Yeah.
Right. And then that starts to like get blown out or like changed. And then you have like gentlemen's tacticals. I use the term post tactical. I would almost say that in certain ways, like now, like post tactical could almost just be rolled into EDC. Like it probably
Mm-hmm.
could, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a design standpoint. Um, so that to me, and so why was tactical so popular? I would say I think a lot of it was around utility
Mm-hmm.
and form factor and the fact that like, okay, so at that point, like you had big like combat knives, like big, that's like tactical, but no one's carrying like a huge fighting knife for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. They will carry a pocket knife that feels the same way
Yeah. Has the
aesthetically, has the
DNA. Yeah.
same, yeah, the DNA, the design language, like that's there. And you're like, this is sick. I can put it in my pocket. Okay. Um, I think it's basically the same process. And we've talked about this a little bit, but I think that with tactical custom, at a point the product got so hard to get, people started to branch out into these like smalls, like EDC, pry bars, things like the Cypop, Nux, like drivers, like all of these little things. And at first, people bought them because they were kind of cool and they were available. And then they liked it. So they bought more and the collections grew.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought is like, people probably bought tacticals. I would imagine there was a lot of makers that got into tacticals because they were doing higher end pieces, saw tactical folders as like something they could produce that was like maybe not as over the top, engraved, Damascus, whatever it was. But then the availability of that thing initially drove demand, created collectors, that made the market larger. I
Yeah.
think the same process has happened with EDC,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think there still is a bastion of the tactical of what you're describing though too, because
Absolutely.
I think the EDC era that we're in, I think it's an expansion more than a conversion.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
think they're all expansions because
yeah,
through these changes, there's always makers that are doing the thing that they were doing before, and
mm,
they're at a point where they're selling everything that they can make, and like they're situated where they want to be with the product that they want to sell.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. And one thing that's interesting to kind of look across the spectrum is when I look at like the bushcraft, the other direction.
Yeah.
I call it the other direction because that's how I have the visual model, but it's like different categories favor different things, and I've noticed bushcraft favors doesn't favor innovation nearly as much as
Right.
other sections, and it favors like value and performance over innovation. Whereas
Right.
EDC favors uniqueness
Right.
and like I guess head turningness more so.
Right.
And so that's where I'm trying to straddle of like what are the customers wanting in these different pools without
Well, and like
like shilling.
collector versus true user, like there's user collectors, there's collectors, and there's user users, right?
Hmm.
Where it's like bushcraft is a great example of that, especially around like a value priced product
Hmm.
where you're going to go out and you're going to beat this thing up. It's just knives are consumables at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Most people don't think of it that way, but like to sharpen a knife, you're removing material. You sharpen enough times, you lose the tool,
Yeah.
right? It's going to wear
Hmm.
down to nothing. It's going to take a long, long time, but it doesn't make it not a consumable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that group looks at knives in that way. I'm
Hmm.
just going to use this thing till it's used up and then I'll replace it. But they're not like necessarily worried about like replacing it with higher quality or higher price point or,
Yeah. Yeah.
upgrading.
Yep.
They need it to do that job or that job better. If there's a reason that they can do the job better at a good value, I think it's attractive.
Yeah, yeah. And I found that to be an interesting study with like I said, the LT5 project, because a lot of people who would buy 5-inch camp knives, I think, have never heard of us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I designed titanium frame locks for a long time. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's exciting. But I guess to digress with the Blade Show is like it confirmed my suspicion that it's like this is an EDC with some tactical sort of crowd. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I'm happy to be in that pool, and I really enjoyed it. But it changes the way I look at it for the future of like we are going to have to curate for that show, which
I
means
think I want to make a modification to that. I think you have to curate for shows.
mhm,
If you are doing a show correctly, you are curating for that show.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's clear to me now. I think it was less clear to me before. I think I
Yeah.
went into it of like I want some of everything,
Right.
and then I go there and I'm like, well, I do have some of everything, which is good,
Yeah.
but I should have known what they were going to want, and that is
I
what they
think
wanted.
I think that's really tricky. I think where I would look is like you want some of everything and then something specific.
Hmm.
I don't think it's about getting the perfect mix of products for an audience because that changes.
Hmm.
But so here would be like a way that I would look at this. Like you have the LT5 and you're like, this is not an LT5 crowd. If next year you showed up, you have the LT5, you post about the LT5, but you bring 5 LT10s, you will find real quick that the knife audience that's not an LT5, there's going to be a bunch of people that show up to the table to buy a 10-inch version of that knife,
Mm,
because that 10-inch version is the specific thing that is rare, that is
yeah.
interesting. And I think that I don't think it's a product problem. I think sometimes it's just like a visibility, presentation, like availability issue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Somebody in that room, we talk about this in the industry general, which is every time somebody tells you a product won't work, right? Specifically, let's just say fixed blades, right? So like if a production company is like, yeah, fixed blades don't sell, there is a company that all they are doing is producing fixed blades,
Exactly. Yeah.
okay, and making a lot of money doing it. That thought process holds across the entire industry, I think. For everyone who's like, oh, this type doesn't sell, there's
Mm,
somebody doing it.
exactly.
What are they doing differently?
Yeah, there is some benefit in focus, I think, because like fixed blades at the end of the day are their own niche that obviously is subdivided into niche. But it's like I think there is a once you become known for something
Yep.
that has power, because it's like
Absolutely.
if you want to get one of the best folders, there's names associated with the best folders,
Yeah.
and then there's names associated with the best fixed blades,
Right.
and there's enough of a chasm there that it's like it's kind of like in a auto industry, which I always bring up. It's like just because they make the best truck doesn't mean they make the best sports car. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that you might have totally different tastes. You're not like the brand loyalty evaporates as soon as you change
Right.
application. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Specific product. I'm going to make a Is it a fork? Making a forecast? I'm going to forecast something. Or so first 7 years for me, like was fixed blades. Okay. When I switched to folders, I think I lost 50% of my customer base. I didn't notice it because the folder market was so huge. I have a sneaking suspicion that you are in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I think that TJ Schwartz, the designer, built a huge customer base, like, and you said it, around like your modern, like technical, tactical folders,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if you don't consider them tactical.
Yeah.
But when you started producing your own product, you went fixed blades. And because of how you were doing it, you have like a huge uptick in customers. I actually bet a lot of those original customers that know you for the folders aren't in the mix.
Oh, that's 100% true.
If you were to
People's tell me
debut a
that.
folder, yeah. So
Yeah.
right. So it's like if you at some point debut a folder, those people come back into the fold, which is what I'm experiencing now with fixed
Going
blades.
back to fixed blades.
And
Yeah.
it's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sports car versus truck, I think, analogy, like summed up, is like they're not gone. Some of
Mm-hmm.
them are, right? Like there's attrition, but like it's just right now, it's like the product isn't their product.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I think that's super interesting.
that's 100% a fact because I have people regularly who tell me they're like, I just put two and two together that
Yeah.
you're the same Schwartz because
Right.
it's like it's such a different sort of image
Yeah.
that's around the fixed blades.
Yeah.
That yeah, people tell me that they knew of both of my identities without putting two and two together.
Without putting two and two together.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's really fun. It's been satisfying getting back into fixed blades a little bit, because like there's this side of the market that just absolutely loves them. Whether it's user or collector, there's a side that is what they like.
Hmm.
And it's been really fun being able to kind of like reconnect to that. And I love fixed blades. Like I've
Yeah, I'm
always
one
been
of
like
them.
a fixed blade guy,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
I feel authentic in selling fixed blades because as soon as I started making my own,
Yeah.
I in my head I'm like I'm gonna go straight to folders. That's all I
Right.
know. But I started carrying it because I made it,
Right.
and then I started just not wanting a folder anymore. Like it actually captured me from a not from a like this is what I made and I'm carrying it, but from a like I actually prefer fixed blades, I think,
Yeah.
because I am fortunate enough to be in an environment where I can put an LT5 on my hip and
Yeah.
wear it 7 days a week, and I don't have any issue with that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Nobody cares if you wear a sword.
Yeah, right.
It's cool.
Yeah,
Okay. I don't want to leave Blade Show yet. So there's two more things that tie in. Okay. So did you get a chance to walk the show?
yeah.
Okay.
Not till a little
Um,
later, but yeah.
okay, but you got to do it. I noticed one thing overarching, and I just made like this weird tie-in. So the thing that I noticed is a huge uptick in micro production brands. Okay. So these are like white label slash like what we would consider like a white label or like OEM.
Yeah.
So a designer is having a product made by an OEM company, generally in Asia, and then that and like building it like a brand around that.
Hmm.
The tie-in that I just made is from tactical to EDC, the availability will like because of the availability of these like white label OEMs, are they like on track to become the next like most demand collected thing? Does it hold? You see
Well,
what I'm saying? It's like because of availability, it is now the easiest product to actually get.
mhm,
So will people start to like be like, oh, this is a great design. The build quality is amazing. I can afford it, right? And there's
mhm,
not a crazy line to get it.
yeah,
I now have 5 of these things. I am now a collector of this thing and this genre.
yeah, yeah.
What do you think?
Um, that's a good question. That's a really because I mean I've absolutely witnessed the exact same trend. It's a 6 or 8 year trend, but
Sure.
it's really like heating up. Is I
This
think what's
year,
yeah.
I think there was another thing that happened, which for some reason Booth does not, well, it's, I don't think it's weird actually. Because of the last 6 or 8 years, because of people increasing what they're doing, more and more people coming into a sphere, the booth and table game has been getting kind of better and better.
Hmm.
So I think this year I noticed it was like a lot of 6 foot tables had banners.
Yeah.
I think that I visually noticed, oh, I don't notice that name or I don't know that name and walk over and look at it and like, oh, okay, cool. It's like white label.
So I think we're seeing like a broad trend. We're seeing it materialize in the knife industry. I don't think it's a knife industry thing. I think what
Yeah.
it is I listen. I was listening to. I follow some comedians and stuff. I was listening to where they were talking about how not long ago, if you're coming in as a comedian, you're trying to get on a sitcom, on a TV show, you're trying to get on Saturday Night Live, you're trying to get on the A list, like primetime television
Right.
or in a movie, and you basically have to get into the big system, the big players to get ahead.
Okay.
And there's a new era in that scene where because of like TikTok and Instagram, people are going straight to being famous
Right.
independently.
Right.
And I think that's what we're seeing in the knife industry is like it used to be you couldn't hire an OEM and have, thousands of knives show up at your door
Right.
because without the infrastructure of like distribution, it just was like not going to work
Ooh,
out.
this is good.
Whereas now you can go more direct to the customer and you can become popular without infrastructure is really the difference. And that I think is in almost every single industry. You're seeing musicians get famous on platforms
Dude, that
where,
that's an amazing observation. I had not put that together in that way, and that feels 100%
like,
correct.
the guy like Richmond, north of Richmond,
Yeah.
that like
Yeah,
that
great
guy. It's
example.
like he didn't get a record label. He
Right.
just became famous for music, right?
Yeah, you're
And
basically you're bypassing the system.
it's a new bypass that opened up all the way through the economy, and I think it's being taken advantage of like all over the place.
Oh, that's
Um,
super interesting. Okay, so then here would be like my add-on question. Is is there is there a risk of longevity based in that because of a lack of a certain type of infrastructure going
yes,
into it?
I think
Would
yeah,
you,
exactly.
would you say?
Yeah, because I'm not discrediting the value of infrastructure either, because the systematic approach that like a big business takes to like
Yeah.
sustainability is probably lacking in a lot of these like business models. Not, I'm not knocking anybody. Like I wish everybody the best. I'm just
Yeah.
saying
100%.
you have to be careful about walking into a new era where there's this new channel, but that doesn't mean everything that was done the old way is wrong either. You know what I mean? So, um, you
Well,
have to,
yeah. What lessons can you take? Like, so here would be a just general commentary. Like, if you are doing this and you're doing like white label and you're doing social media, figure out where you can diversify.
Mhm.
I mean, that diversification is going to be the answer 9 times out of 10. Like if I'm consulting with somebody, right? Like
Yeah,
where are you single line? Like where are you diversified? Like where
yeah,
can you support this system?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting.
you look at like some of the big brands, like if you're looking at the knife industry specifically, like a big box store
Right.
or like an Amazon top rated item, like that we all know like that's a little bit of a rented land aspect to that. Like you
Right.
have to keep the knife in that glass case in the box store, and you're like part of your company ethos is fighting for that position. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Which is still the case because if you're in this new channel where you're on like Instagram and TikTok or whatever it is, it's a different type of rented land that you have to be weary of, where it's
Right.
like the rug, you're still standing on a rug that you don't own.
Right.
And so it's like I don't know of a way. I mean, that's ultimately like the holy grail is like not standing on one of those rugs, but I don't know that that exists. So it's just being aware that like Instagram and YouTube and stuff, if these are your channels for like quote unquote getting famous outside of the system, it's like, do you know where the risk lies? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Because like an established business with like selling to big box stores or something, I mean, there's a relationship there, there's a human aspect to it, and there's like a battleground behind the scenes too. But they know that they've been doing it for 30 years or
Yeah.
whatever.
Same
Where,
thing though. I mean, this is diversification, right? Because like you're a big box store and the buyer changes
yeah, exactly.
and that shifts the entire uh you know process.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like from I guess the other question with that would be like, okay, it's yeah, it's the availability. So it's like the infrastructure and the availability. It seems like it would be easier to overproduce at a time where that could hurt you than some of the other like more traditional methods,
Hmm.
right? Because like you can, in a way, you can turn on the tap and like, oh, order more. Maybe that happens at a time when everyone else orders more, and that now is an issue,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Versus like slower or like I don't know, like more traditional manufacturing methods. Well, and it's weird because it's not even I'm not saying traditional manufacturing methods because like this is also industry specific. I'm talking about like if you are a custom knife maker or if you are a small knife manufacturer, like there are also some different types of limits, right? Okay. So that was my big takeaway like from Blade this year was I just felt like, oh, the last one was this year felt like 100% pre-pandemic levels of excitement and just like it was busy.
Hmm.
Um the we the line for the show, we talked about this a little bit, but the line for the show started Monday night before. So basically, people that waited to get into the show, the people in front waited 5 days sleeping out front of a hotel.
Wow.
5 days.
I
That
think
is like
I don't
passion.
think I've seen them wait that long in
I
before.
haven't. I'm sure it's happened. I remember like Wednesday because I'd show up Wednesday, I'd go check the show, and like there'd be a few stragglers out there. Um, this year, the majority of the people at the very front of the line were for Dark Timber Forge.
Mm.
So big shout out. I think he is doing something that is really representative of like how you build that. Like, why, how do people come and sit outside for 5 days? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
He's building a huge community. I think he does like campouts and like motorcycle runs and like
Nice.
builds, he's building community. So like the people that are hanging out in line is, you've got guys from all over, they're just hanging out and eating food. And it's just another place that they're being community and
Yeah,
visiting. So props to like them and that side of the community, which is pretty
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. No, it was a vibrant blade show for sure. It was the sands were shifting in the room,
Yeah.
but there was a lot of sand in the room.
A lot of sand in the room, man.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a great show. We did it weird this year because we only did one day. We took Tom's booth for Saturday, and I really enjoyed it from a stress level. Like, I didn't have to bring as much product, but in reality, like, I probably brought 2/3 of what I would have done if I had done the whole weekend. Um, and I think the big takeaway for me was that if I'm gonna do Blade, I just need my own booth.
Hmm.
Um, and it's purely like this ownership thing where it's like, if I'm already doing all the work to like be there for a day, I might as well be there for 3,
Yeah, yeah,
and I might as well really dig in and just be like, all right, I'm doing my Saturday events, my Friday
yeah,
events, like, and I'm going to get more time with people.
yeah. The
So
cost of getting there, along with
yeah,
the human costs, you might as well amortize that over a bigger
that's
pie.
my
Yeah,
thought.
yeah.
Right. But you and I both taught classes. Mine was much more freeform. I was curious. You want to give a little, like, how'd your class go?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it went well. I told people like I had to get back to the booth afterwards. I talked for a second, but I was like, if you want to continue this conversation, totally open to it. Come by the booth, and a good number of them did come by the booth
That's awesome.
after, which I was happy about, and got to like kind of extend the conversation, answer more questions and stuff. And I really enjoyed it. A lot of faces I wasn't sure was going to show up because I'm like,
Right.
I've never taught a class. I've never even had a booth. Like, I don't know what kinds of people even attend these. Like, and almost everybody else, I don't know them, which is a cool thing. There was a few people in there I'd met before, or some good friends, but a lot of people that I just had never met, and so it was great to meet them in that context and like have a conversation with them, and it was I really enjoyed it.
What was the overall demographic? Is it maker?
Um, Man, it was a mix because it was like
It's
Kyle
cool.
Royer was in there,
Yeah.
who's a ABS Mastersmith,
Yeah.
like pinnacle. I mean, he's just amazing. And then there's like a couple, at least one actual like manufacturer from I can't remember where they're from, but they were like 4 guys that own a machine shop that make components for knives. I don't know if they make complete knives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then a couple other forge guys. It's a surprising number of forging guys in there.
I
That's
don't
what
think it's surprising.
okay.
You are presenting something that is outside of their immediate like wheelhouse in most cases at a high level. You're presenting it to a group of professionals that like to learn things. And I think a lot of this is tied into the desire to have more productivity.
Mm,
Like, they're curious. Like, you're a
yeah.
CNC guy. They want to know.
Yeah. No, that's true that someone that's less in line with me is more interested in it.
In
Yeah.
a certain way, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I do, yeah, I'm curious about CNC, or like I'm
Hmm.
curious about like how I can do production.
Yeah.
I think that tracks. I love to hear that too,
Yeah.
because it means that on, like, I always say, like, other side of the aisle, and this is like not an adversarial comment at all. It's that literally at knife shows, like, a lot of times, like, the stock removal guys are separated from like the forging guys. And it's
Yeah.
like literally like a side of the aisle.
Yeah.
Um, but I love seeing more crossover, right? It's same for me. Like, I want to learn more of that. I love seeing
Yeah.
them want to be like, hey, how can I do
Yeah.
a production model?
Well, it's just like you. I mean, you're one of your like pet projects has been
Yeah.
learning about forging.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just to make me a better craftsperson.
Yeah. more
right? Like
well-rounded.
purely for learning for
Yeah.
interest.
One of
Um,
the one of the quick little story. One of the funny things
yeah.
that happened. So I have a booth that says Schwartz on it. I see this guy walking up, and I know immediately that's Steve Schwartzer, and he's walking up from like I can see him walking like beelining from all the way across. And he comes right up to me and he's like, somebody came over and asked me if I started a knife company, so I had to come check it out. And so it was the first time I ever met him. I don't know that he ever knew who I was before that, but we just
He's
had
great,
we had a great
man.
conversation. But it was just funny that
Yeah.
somebody was like, "Did you start a knife brand over there, like Schwartz
I
and
love
Schwartzer?"
that. He's a good
But
dude.
yeah, that was cool.
Um, our class was like super freeform. It was basically on table sales and kind of like show etiquette. And it's not something. So I was basically just an assistant for Tom Crine. So he kind of had the outline for the class, but it's interesting because when you look at this, it's so hard to present even a baseline because the basics are basic. Like basic show and table etiquette are really basic.
Hmm.
And from that point on, it just like spirals. We ended up hanging out for like an hour over the class time. Some people, I think, there was, I think, a mix of maker, non-maker. I could see where some people higher level, like things that started to push into like brand and strategy, people weren't interested. On the flip side, I saw the people that got super, super interested in that stuff.
Hmm.
There was like basic, just like it was a really diverse audience from a standpoint of like their own demand.
Yeah.
And your demand around your product drastically changes like what your table game is.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So like talking
Yeah.
about like lotteries and like first come first serves, like if you're talking about first come first serve to someone who is not selling out a table, that's a different,
It's a little bit, yeah.
it's a little abstract,
Yeah, because it's like
right?
you're implying that you're willing to turn down a sale if you're doing these methods,
Lotteries, yeah,
which, yeah,
basically. So
yeah.
like we got to break down a lot of that and like a little history of like show lotteries and stuff.
Hmm.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoy being included inside of like the Blade show. I don't know, like I don't even know what to consider that, like expert like roster.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an honor.
Feels good,
I'm
right?
pretty, yeah, yeah, it does. I was
Yeah.
very, very happy that they invited me and that was cool.
I was bummed that I
Yeah.
didn't get to see yours. Yours
I,
was Saturday, so
I didn't see yours either. So
I know.
we
It's
need
all
to,
good.
guess we talked about doing a podcast where it's like a two-part, like you teach your class, I teach mine.
That's actually, yeah, that's a very good idea. Or at least discussing like the the really meaty parts
Fundamentals.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, the fundamentals.
With mine, I had a bunch of note cards, and each note card was like 2 words because I knew what I wanted to
Right.
say, but I just was going to riff on each card.
Yeah.
And I practiced it like walking around in circles in the shop, kind of like a few times, and kind of was timing myself. I was like, yeah, that's a good amount of time. That's a good amount of time. I go in there, and just like the extra adrenaline made me get through them way faster.
Yeah.
And I get through it, and I look at the watch. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, oh, that was a little early. So I pivoted, and I started having questions come up, and I think the dots were connected the most in like the second half where they were asking questions, and I underestimated the value of that.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit serendipitous that like me accelerating through it benefited us.
Worked out.
It felt like
I,
it.
I would say the same for us. Like the question, that was really the only way to give actual advice
Hmm.
because I
That's
don't know what, are you in a booth? Are you in a table? Are you selling knives? What are you like? How many are you bringing 50 or three?
yeah, yeah,
Like, and
yeah.
as soon as they started asking questions, it started to like really flow. That's
Hmm.
very, yeah, because you're relating it to their experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Then
Did you do a handout or anything like that?
I did not. I did not do a handout. I considered it. I gave them homework,
Nice.
but it was not in a handout. I kind of wrote on a whiteboard a little bit, and I reiterated it enough times. I was hoping that people would do it, and
How
handout
many
probably.
can you verbally go through the homework or is it too much?
Yeah, yeah, I can.
What was it?
Yeah. So it was there's two aspects, two angles to the same idea. One is that take a little bit of a moment to think back and in the current of what processes you have access to. So this could be something you can do or
Yeah.
something that's close to you. Like you have a good friend who owns a machine shop. You have a
Right.
friend who has a Cricut cutter. I mean, it could be anything, right? Like, um, and I'm not just talking about just anything. I'm talking about the ones that you have known to be exceptional. Because it's like I found that I've been in business long enough to have had experiences like with the person who prints the cards, my certificate of authenticity. One of my favorite people that I've ever worked with, and all he does is print my cards. But I'm
Yeah.
like, he runs an exceptional business. He's right here in Boise. He's on the list. And like, think of the names and the processes that are the most identifiable as like these are well run operations with people at the head that are smart, with like end products that are good, and make a list of those exceptional things. And the longer you think, the more you can come up with. But if you can come up with that exceptional list and then look at the list and start thinking about what a product would be if you combine those already exceptional pieces, and start thinking about, rather than a product first and then how to make it, think of combining the exceptional things that you already know about into something that has value. You know what I mean? Because if you combine a bunch of exceptional people and exceptional businesses, processes, maybe something you're doing in-house that you have that's like what you excel at, if you can combine those, the product's going to kick ass, because it's like you've built it upside down. You've built from only like the gold bars. You know what I mean?
I mean,
And so,
this is Pareto's law in production. Absolutely. So like 20% probably of like your vendors,
yeah,
uh, you know, connections, other craft people.
yep,
It's funny. I'm gonna give a shout out to our screen printer right now for the absolute same reason. So we use this guy Jordy, who's Days
yeah,
printing, and it's like he's just so good and so talented. And it's like even when I don't have something for him, like a lot of times I'll be like, man, what can I
yeah,
get Jordy on?
yep,
Just because I like working with him so much. So it's like,
yeah. That's
dude,
exactly what I'm talking
that's a
about.
great exercise.
If
Yeah, I
you,
love that.
so
I'll do that homework.
one of the big things is like think about combining him with other people like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like converging. Sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes it doesn't. You have to stare at that list for a long time.
You could also be a
But
catalyst, right? It's like
yeah,
you might get along with this person amazingly and they
yeah,
like you tie them
mhm,
into someone else and it doesn't work.
yep. And then like the comb that I used to make, I've said multiple times I use that as an example. That was what I did. I didn't have the like intentionality, but when I think back at my thought process, that's what I was doing. Was I was like, man, knives are so hard to make. What if I got all the people together that are good to work with and that isn't so difficult? What would it be? And it's like I made a comb. It was so random. But
Yeah, but you're like, what was
that's
the process to make that comb? It
yeah.
was
That was the most complex thing I could think of. Complex, interesting,
right.
valuable thing I could make from a short list of vendors.
Yeah.
And so, and the other facet is that if you already have a product and you need to create a list of the processes involved
Okay.
and look really hard at it and think about like, it's the old generic like a chain's only as strong as its weakest link.
Yeah.
But if there's a weak link in there and we all almost intuitively know what the weak link is, you need to consider deleting or changing it, and not living with it, because you can't live with a bad piece of a process inside of your projects. You cannot live with it. Like it is not okay to tolerate a weak link. And that sounds like kind of harsh. I'm not like, I don't know, maybe that came out weird, but I'm just saying it's only as good as its culmination of parts. And so you have to be really scrutinous over what you're doing. And it's easy to like live with something because that's just the way you're doing it.
Yeah.
But you intuitively know, where the weakness is in what you're doing.
Right.
And like I said, one of the angles is consider what would remain if that was just gone. And one of the famous quotes I've heard, it's actually from Elon Musk. He said like the best process is no process. And it's like if you extracted that, and that's where like the LT5, our weakness in the Overland was stonewash, because stonewash is the thing that slows us down the most.
Right.
And if I'm going to take stonewash out and only have Cerakote, it creates friction because it's a stainless that's only going to be offered in Cerakote, which that's friction, right? That like becomes problematic. So the net decision is like carbon steel with Cerakote is a more sensical thing. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if it was carbon steel, what people like carbon steel? Bushcraft people love carbon steel. I'm going to design a bushcraft knife. So it started with the Overland. By pulling out stonewash, it turned into a bushcraft knife
Yeah.
because I just pulled on that thread. So it's like the process when something was missing was still a knife, but it needed a different target audience because I didn't want to just start selling only Cerakote stainless steels to the EDC world because they would complain. You know what I mean? Because for a good reason. It's like you have the most stainless steel in the world, or one of them, and you only are offering it in Cerakote. Like, you know what I mean?
Tell you
It's
what, low key, that was basically a 2-minute masterclass in product development. Dude, I mean, that really like what you just went through surrounding the LT5. If people run their products through that thought process,
mhm.
the success rate goes up drastically. That's impressive. I don't think about my products that way.
And
That's super impressive.
it's backwards. Like I said, it's the
Yeah.
process. I mean, the process is the product. That's what I mean when I say that, is that you're selling that list. That's what I kept saying in the class. You're selling the list. And if the list has a bad thing in it, you're selling a dozen eggs with one that's rotten. So sell only good eggs. You know what I mean? And you can make a business that has weak links in the chain, but like to get like true acceleration out of your business and to, I think, reach like new levels and break barriers, break the glass ceiling type situations, like you cannot afford the weakness. You just
Well,
can't.
and there's this tracks at different levels too, because as a like if you're a custom maker, a lot of times the weakest link is going to be a process that you have ownership of. And that there can be a decision there that like, well, I like doing this. I like cutting everything on the bandsaw. What is your I like hand grinding everything, or but you will find a process that is the most time consuming, the least ergonomic, like the highest consumption, the highest risk of failure. There is something there, and you
Hmm.
at least acknowledging it gives you tools to come up with solutions. It might be like for me, it would have been I freehand ground everything for so long because of my design styles,
Hmm.
right? I did these like curvy swoopy things early on. I couldn't figure out how to fixture it. When I started doing models that would have suited themselves to being fixtured, I didn't do it.
Hmm.
That became my weakest link, right? Because now I'm doing a process in an inefficient way for a result that doesn't warrant it.
Hmm. And
Like,
one other thing I want to add is like, I don't want it to always seem like you're trying to reduce this list, because that's not,
right,
like, it's
right.
not always reductionist, like simmer down. There's also, let's say you have your list for a product you're making. Let's say it's a side pop or whatever.
Yeah,
Let's say you have something that is somewhat unique or hard to get, or you're good at, that not a lot of people are good at. Like it's kind of like a little gold star.
right,
It's like you're really good at hand grinding or something.
right, right.
Try adding that to a list and see what it changes. Because for example, in your
Right.
case, if you add your freehand grinding skill to a knife,
Right.
that allows you to do recurves and swoopy stuff.
Sure.
So if it's in that list, you should stretch the design to utilize it. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is like when you add or reduce things in that list, let the design take the form that basically maximizes the list. You know what I mean?
What we do, like almost, I'm just trying to think like this, this is a great like exercise for me to do. Uh, it's almost like the idea of a strength and weakness audit,
Yes.
right? Or
Yeah.
like, so like letting efficient things be efficient has been like my goal, right? So like that thought of the grinding would kind of fall into that
Yeah.
category. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't do this like compound recurve hollow grind on a fixture that my brain can come up with, but I can freehand grind it.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that as a production model, bad idea. Doing that as an open bid custom, good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Man, I haven't talked this much in a while.
Right.
I'm starting to lose my voice.
Same.
The flip side of that really, yeah, it really is. Are there processes that are unique, interesting, or like individual to you in some way
Yeah.
that you can apply to an efficient process and get a higher yield out of it at the end? So like
And
finishing would be like a great example,
exactly.
right? Like I can
And
take a titanium part, I can do crazy anodizing to it. That increases the value of that part.
and I made sure to iterate in the class like it's also not about efficiency because there's
Right.
forge guys in
Right.
there. There's Kyle Royer. So like if you're really good at something that's really inefficient, which means it's
Right.
really hard to replicate because it takes a lot of man hours and it's
Yeah.
very hard to do, like hand grinding or like doing some crazy
Yeah. Yeah.
filigree or like
Engraving or
handmade
inlays or
Damascus or
yeah.
whatever. That doesn't mean because that's inefficient doesn't make it a weak link. It can actually be a strength, and the
Right.
inefficiency creates value. So inefficiency can create value, like hand grinding. You know what I mean? If you're doing something that you can't do otherwise, but if you're hand grinding something inefficiently that is not gaining the product any feature that
Right.
could be done efficiently, that's where you have a bad process for it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it need
Yeah.
the inefficient thing needs to gain you something that efficient things do not.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
not
And this is just like this, I think baseline, this is not being lazy
yeah,
around your process. Like just defaulting to like, well, this is how I make things. And it's like everything goes into that one category of making.
yeah,
You see this with people that are really, really skilled sometimes and they make something super basic. But the basic thing is like almost too nice
hmm,
like for its form now. And you're like, yeah, you just defaulted to spending all of this time on finishes
yeah,
when in that product didn't require it.
yeah, yeah.
Right. That's pretty interesting. Okay. That's some good food for thought. So takeaway, if you're making things maybe is to do that audit, do that homework. That's a really interesting exercise. I like it.
Glad you think so.
Yeah. I'm the weakest link. So that is over the years, like I know that in my processes, any process that I can remove myself from usually gets better.
Oh, geez. I don't know if that. I don't think that's true.
I guess it depends on what the category is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
all right. Okay, so dude, I feel like that's a pretty good episode.
Hopefully that was a good rebound for you guys.
Good rebound. We're sorry guys that we've missed a slew of these. Kind of back on track now, at least looking at our schedules. Um, we will check in with Patreon. Saw some floating questions. Thanks for hanging out. Hopefully you're still here hanging out and listening.
Yeah. Thank you guys very
All right.
much for your patience.
Yep. All right.
Peace.
Be well.